Jake, Lee, welcome. As you know, I've been covering this industry for many decades, and I've never seen retailers move this aggressively on promotions. It actually feels like every week there's a new program, a new discount, a new way to capture the value conscious shopper. So let's start big picture. What are you both seeing from your vantage point at RD Solutions? Is this promo intensity sustainable, or are we watching retailers outspend their way to margin erosion? Lee, let me come to you first on this. When I walk into stores today, I'm seeing buy two, get one free, digital coupons stacked on shelf discounts, private label rollbacks everywhere. From a commercial standpoint, what's driving this promo pressure? Are retailers desperate, or is this a calculated land grab?
Yes to all of that. I think there's a lot of noise in the marketplace around is there not inflation, tariffs, what's happening there, and that's from a consumer perspective creating lots of angst about what's happening now, what might come. From a retailer perspective, I don't know how to price things today or in the future because I don't know what's going to happen. And so we're seeing a lot of activity ultimately around just reshaping price perception. And it's not just the low price guys like the Aldis and the Walmarts, but I mean Whole Foods is getting into the game with the huge number of markdown recently, and so it's there's a lot of activity in the marketplace. I think ultimately all around. I mean, ultimately saving the consumer money, but big picture, I think it's reshaping that price perception so that because that's what everybody's looking for apparently.
Yeah, and I think that one of the most important things, and what you guys bring to the party, is helping retailers really understand when to do certain things. So, for example, for Halloween, I saw, October 15th, Kroger decided to put all their candy on sale. So that's 2 weeks before Halloween. And, in our last conversation, people were buying, candy for Halloween months ago. So maybe it's a little too late. So, Jake, what I'm really curious about, because I'm hearing this from CPGs all the time, how do brands even compete when the retailer is essentially saying to consumers, our private label is the value leader, period? What does the data tell you about who's actually winning in this environment?
So we are definitely seeing a growth in private label. I think it's definitely a challenge for a CPG brand. I think it's if you think about it, it's in the interest of the retailer to continue to drive private label kind of conversation. I would contend that every business is motivated by like personal gain, right? That's kind of the purpose of business is to win and gain share. Um, so I would kind of contend the growth of private label could be argued as a function of brands' decisions in years past, many years past, in how they priced, how they negotiated, etc. And you drove this urgency within retail, like, okay, we have to generate some profit. Can we build a competitive product to it? And I think you kept on seeing growing and growing, growing private label. I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but I mean, the prevalence of it is all over the Thanksgiving basket. It's everywhere. So I don't know that you're going to see a change, and I think it's a trend that now retailers are not to say hooked on it, but there's a real benefit to it, and the consumer. I was just going through a bunch of different websites over the last in preparation for this conversation. There is a huge number of private brand as like 70% of what you're seeing promoted and actively communicated on a retailer's site nowadays. So it's a new landscape of how you compete. And the other interesting thing we're seeing, sorry, just one more point, is not only do you have the private brand competing there, but you also are starting to see so much of the emerging brand or the growth-based brand taking space. And I think that's another competitor that's not particularly to this conversation, but that is growing significantly. We just had our board meeting last week before, and so we always debate like why are we doing well? Because you don't want to make sure it's not random. You try to base it on some real practical aspects, and I really think it's the disruption of the shelf and the growth of the both primarily the emerging brand showing up on the shelf. And you try to figure out why that happened. Well, the retail or media environment has now gone from a television was the only way to get into a household to every form of social engagement with a consumer at every level. I think now with that, you can find the right product at the right time, and all retailers want to do is make money and sell products. So, um, you're seeing so much disruption to the shelf. So we're excited by it, but it's definitely a different environment for a CPG, the traditional large scale CPG, to compete in.
I also really appreciate what you just said about the emerging brands, because I think that retailers and private label are looking, to innovate, and they're looking to the emerging brands for that innovation. I mean, if we just look the past couple weeks, Kroger, coming out with their private brand on protein. I mean, that never would have happened, 5 years ago, and I'm sure they got that impetus from those emerging brands. No question about it. So let's talk a bit about Walmart Cash. This feels like a quiet revolution to me. It's not just about a loyalty program. It's literally money in a digital wallet. Lee, how should brands be thinking about programs like this? And does it change where trade dollars need to go?
Yeah, I mean, it's an opportunity, 100%. There's a lot of talk about retail media and how innovative it is, and I'll come at it through the lens of it's doing the same things that have been done for years through different ways. It's obviously a lot more trackable, and everybody loves that in today's world. But it's another form of that. And so, where I might have invested heavily in an advertising circular, a few years ago, it's going into a Walmart Cash promotion now. I mean, it's really amazing as we see the breadth of those offers and how aggressive they're starting to be. And it's you can target things, and so we're seeing offers that are store specific, from big brands. And so clearly they're looking at it and saying, where am I not selling product where I think I should be, and I'm going to target that area to do that. So it's super effective. And we're about a year and a half, I think, into seeing those offers, and month after month there's more and more. So something's working there, and it's resonating with the customer. And I think from a strategic perspective, it's a really smart move on Walmart's part, because it sort of introduces a thing that feels like a promotion without necessarily impacting their EDLP promise to the marketplace.
Talk to me a bit more about the store specific promotions, if you will. I mean, when I really think about merchandising and marketing and demographics of an area of a store, if in fact we have that promotional ability to go into a single store and do a promotion that another store that's 2 miles away of the same chain
Yeah.
doesn't have, what kind of impact does that have on the shopper?
Well, it's hyper targeted, and keep in mind, Walmart Cash is just available online right now, and so it's not something that's exposed in the store. And so it's like everything digital. You can get super targeted with that, and so it's using the data. If I've got one store that's clustered around other stores that's selling significantly less product than everything else, let's put an offer in there and see if it spikes it. Might be where I need to get rid of inventory. So there's a number of factors that might go into it, but it's just that ability. Once you have the ability to be able to target in a hyper local way like that, it's not somebody having to go and change the shelf tag. So you see a lot more of that online.
Do you think that we're going to see that in stores?
It's a good question. As far as I know, we haven't seen that yet. But it perhaps is a natural extension to what's happening in stores, especially as Walmart, as others are starting to roll out ESLs, which could make something like that much more feasible without having a big labor burden to it.
What comes to mind is, when I was growing up, in New Jersey, and my father was in the brokerage business, so obviously we knew all the store managers and so on. And whenever there was whether it was a ShopRite or a food fair or whatever that had extra merchandise, that manager was really empowered to do something like this. So maybe we're shifting back to being able to do it, but now in a smarter, more technological way. I don't know. So Jake, I want to keep on talking about this loyalty shift. We've seen traditional loyalty programs for many years, Kroger Plus, Target Circle. Now we're seeing cash back, instant gratification, even fintech integration. From the data that RDSolutions is analyzing, is this fundamentally changing how shoppers define value?
I don't think we're changing. I think value is now convenience, right? Convenience is and instant gratification is the current expectation of consumers. So they're not so much data driven, but I look at it just why did the program shift? Because you want to meet the customer where the customer is, right? Or the consumer. And I think what we're really seeing is people want the value to accumulate at different ways in their lives, whether or not you want to accumulate the value on an airfare card, you want points. Does the main value we're getting is the consumer behavior and the consumer activity, right? So which, I guess, credit system or exchange you make is going to be a function of how customers are consuming. So I think in the end, it's really we're seeing this. What are you trading for that information? And I think we're looking for more and more trades. And I don't think there's a huge concern over what you trade for it, whether or not it's discount credit, if it's instant rebate, or if it's points on your airline card. They want that consumer behavior. That's what you're really getting. And so I think that's what we're seeing is that value being kind of amorphed as we figure out what is that information worth to that customer.
Is on average, and I'm going to put you on the spot here, but does the average supermarket retailer, are they equipped to do this? Or is it something that, is really stretching, their toolkit here?
I think it's so to a prior conversation you guys just had, I think, all of this hyper focused or hyper customized experience is all a function of the quality of your underlying data, which I think is currently an effort being undertaken by all, right? If you want to have the idea of like Geico generates advertising in certain markets when they need to underwrite more policies. So they're managing their risk profile. If you wanted to do the same thing to manage your inventory would have to be super accurate. And I think almost everyone would agree that the super accuracy of your inventories are not quite there to take that level of action. So I think what everybody's really working on is getting their underlying data stronger and tougher. I think you're always going to see these big groups that we always talk about, the Walmart, the Amazon, and then continuing down to Target, Kroger, et cetera, et cetera. It's always going to come from the top down, just given the magnitude of opportunity that represents to those retailers, the number of customers they can hit, and from the technology development companies, honestly, the amount of revenue that's associated with those events as well. So we're seeing it trickle into some of those big guys we just talked about, Walmart Cash. You may see those programs in the next 3 to 5 years migrate downstream, or they aren't justified. So there's definitely a lot of technology being worked everywhere across every facet of, I would argue, a lot of the activity I've seen, though these are exciting aspects and it's very consumer focused, we're still seeing a ton of energy spent on better understanding a retailer and a brand's operating behaviors and current active performances. Is where we're still seeing a ton of energy being spent. So yeah, but they're reaching everywhere, right? You think about the breadth of focus to try to continue to keep up with the customer that is pacing at incredible rates. It's a tough puzzle for these companies to continue to be successful, staying right on that wave. That's always the conversation we have. There's a right spot to catch a wave. Too early, you waste a bunch of money. Too late, you can get plowed under and never catch up. So you got to stay in that hot spot. It's a tough business currently, retail and being a brand.
And that's why these retailers need you guys at RDSolutions.
Sure.
So, here's something I've been thinking about, and let me know if I'm off base here. We talk about inflation cooling, but shoppers are still behaving like we're in a crisis. They're switching brands faster, they're cherry picking deals across retailers, they're downloading every app that they can with the coupon. Lee, my question for you is value even about price anymore, or is it really about a combination of price, visibility, and convenience?
Yes to all of that. I mean, technically speaking, inflation may be cooling, but it's everybody's bombarded with these messages all day long on the news, on social about, tariffs and cost of this and the cost of that. Here's the basket of this, and Thanksgiving Day is coming up and Christmas holidays. And so there's just so much noise around how expensive everything is. And then on the retailer side, there's still, I mean, endless contingency planning being done around tariffs, especially as we talk to our clients in the GM side of things where there's major impact. I mean, I was talking to a client the other day. They've got 4 different teams running, 8 different potential scenarios on this so that they're ready for it. The only saving grace is this idea that it's not just them; it's everybody's going to have to deal with it in the same way. Um, so yeah, I mean, price is certainly a big part of it, and price is what's driving. That's a key sticking point for consumers. They're seeking value, and price is certainly part of value. But as you said, there's other factors to it as well. How convenient would that store be? How easy is it to get in and out of that store? So like a brand, there's a lot of elements that go into creating that, but price is certainly a foundational component to it.
Yeah, and all the points that you made. I mean, it's exhausting. It's exhausting for us, and I can only imagine how exhausting it is, for a retailer. You mentioned 8 different scenarios that they're looking at, and they probably hone that down from 20 different scenarios just to have it. Hopefully, this will be over soon. So, Jake, let's get back to execution. Walk me through what that means in practical terms. What's the difference between a brand that wins on value and one that just, cuts their price?
I think the net is you get credit for it. It's a very simple formula. How do you get credit for the investment? Right? I mean, I think that's the end win, right? So then you measure what is credit for the investment in price. It's going to be whether it's basket size, primarily, and loyalty, right? I think those are the 2 dimensions that you're trying to gain that would be the value drive for an investment in price, that people trust you, they're willing to buy their basket from you. They decide that, hey, all of these products, I built a confidence with this retailer that they're maintaining a cost competitive environment for me. So therefore, I'm going to buy all my basket from them. That's the ultimate win, I think, when you think about effective delivery of price investment and promotional activity. That's the game that everyone's trying to get to is loyalty and basket size. I was looking over and I was actually researching again over the weekend. I saw, I think all of these are a really good example of a company that has spent and pretty material and more recently more money than I've seen historically on their investment in their price perception. And then I got deeper and deeper, and you start realizing there's a huge influencer and YouTube population of people producing content every week about all of the great deals that Aldi had. I feel like they're getting a lot of credit for it. We did research actually a long time ago in partnership with some consulting work, and found they weren't getting value. So they've made the right decisions on how they promote themselves and talk about themselves. That they have a really like one of these people had like millions of followers. I was like, oh my gosh, that's the level of credit they've got. So I think that's an ultimate answer. I personally think that the counter argument, I've seen some others that are doing a lot of promotional activity, but almost the complexity and the layering of the value to get all the value. You have to be like this, physicist to figure your way out between I bolt this one on top of that one, and then I can do 2 for 1 here, but I can't there, and then I get a basket discount if I'm a loyalty member, and then I have another program. And I'm like, I just don't know that that's the majority of customers. So I could argue, at least my perception is, you've made it so hard to get that it can't be true, so it kind of feels deceptive. So I think that's the counter argument is there are ways to the value, but you're not getting credit for it because it feels like it's so hard to get that it mustn't. You know what I mean? It feels a bit deceptive. So I can't imagine that's intentional. I think most everyone's trying to do the good thing for the consumer, but those are two opposite ends. Like Aldi is getting incredibly good credit and a growing set of store footprint, right? Every month, quarter, they're releasing lots of new stores. So it tells me they're winning, and then you see the present, and then to the alternative is you're seeing people spending a lot of energy on really complex promotional strategies that I don't think they're getting the credit. So you're not gaining value. So bit of a long-winded, but I think that's kind of seeing it on both ends of trying to deliver the same value, but one is executed successfully and one isn't.
I think your insight on this is dead on. And we have a tendency to overcomplicate things. And I think one of Aldi's successes is that it's not complicated. And again, if you look at the Aldi fines, you look at the, aisle of shame, I mean, all that stuff. I mean, it's just very emotional for a shopper, which is why they've got these millions of people on and these Facebook groups and so on, really just promoting it. And I think your insight there is a very valuable lesson to people. Let's not overcomplicate it. This isn't it's a very intricate, difficult business, but when we talk to the consumer, it shouldn't be. If it's about a promotion, if it's about, value, let's keep it simple because people have enough stuff to deal with without trying to figure out all this stuff. Yeah. That's a great insight. So let's shift gears to something that probably everyone who's watching this cares about. Coming up, Thanksgiving. So every year I look at the basket prices. This year, the numbers are fascinating to me. Jake, you've been tracking holiday meal costs across the channels. What's the story in 2025 for Thanksgiving?
I would argue the main point is private brands are dominating the entire basket, right? I literally went through, I think, every basket, certainly locally in Richmond, over the last weekend in preparation for this conversation, and I think I found every single one of it. I would say 90% private label. Some random, I think I saw like Kraft mac and cheese on one of them. I mean, like one out of like 40 products presented.
Yeah.
I think Wegmans was 100% Wegmans. So, as a macro theme, the dominance of promoting of their own private label, and that was historically a pretty active heavy brand game, right? So I think that's the very simple theme of what I saw for this year.
Yeah, to dovetail on that, interesting. So Walmart and Aldi are both promoting very specifically a sub $40 Thanksgiving basket. And to the point, it's virtually all private label items. I mean, turkey is, I think there's there's a brand on that, but otherwise everything else. What I found interesting was Walmart actually had a Campbell's cream of mushroom soup on their list. And I'm totally speculating here, but as these bundles pick up steam, does that provide yet another opportunity for brands to, engage and pay for space with the retailer? I'm not suggesting that that's why Campbell's is in there, but that's the one item that stood out to me in looking at those two lists.
Yeah, and talk to me, Lee, about this whole idea of bundles. It used to be, I'm going to spend X amount of dollars, I'm going to get a free turkey, or, turkey's a 10 cents a pound or whatever else. But now
Yeah.
it seems like everybody's going after these bundles. What's the strategy there, and is it being successful?
It seems to be. I mean, yeah, to your point, I mean, over the last few years, there's always been there's always been a loss leader turkey deal, usually tied to a value card. I mean, I remember several years ago, the first time I bought a turkey through that, I think I paid 11 cents a pound, and I had a mental barrier there of I want to pay more than 11 cents a pound for a turkey. But I get it. There's a loss leader component to that. So once everybody's done that, how do you up your game on that next time? And I think that's kind of where these bundles have come from. So it's not just doing the turkey, but let's bundle the whole meal. As I was saying before, I mean, Walmart and Aldi are actively promoting. We're starting to see others coming into the market. It's a $40 meal for 10 people. Not surprisingly, all the items are pretty. It's a fairly traditional Thanksgiving meal. But when you really start to break down the list of items between the two, you get a lot more in the Aldi bundle. There's a lot of little pieces that you get that are not included in the Walmart. And so you get 4 different seasoning packs. There's chicken broth, celery, onion, whipped dairy topping, and marshmallows. Things that are not in the other. And so you feed 10 people for under $40. There's different ways to get there. But net, I mean, it's a great way to get people in. I mean, that's a strong, compelling message. A meal, forget a holiday meal, any meal for 10 people for under $40, that's pretty good. That's going to get somebody's attention. And so and as much marketing dollars that those brands in particular are putting behind that promotion, I have no doubt that they'll get some first time customers in. And the game there is proving the quality and showing that experience of all the other values that they could get there. Clearly, that's the strategy.
So, Jake, going back to something that you talked about, where it was mostly, private brands in these bundles, what's the risk for national brands? I mean, Lee talked about, Campbell's. It's a good entree into it and putting the money in there. But are these national brands getting squeezed out of what, we typically think of the most important meal of the year?
Well, the facts say yes, right? I mean, so then the goal is like the why, right? I mean, I go back to the same conversation we had before, though, right? I mean, the interest of every business is to maximize their success. I mean, they will continue to drive private label because it's in their interest. So, I mean, it's a customer-led industry, right? Consumer-led industry. From grocers are going to continue to transform their shelf to maximize the value of each square inch, square foot, square whatever dimension of measurement you want to make. They can start floating in the air. I guess we'll get more square footage, but net, they're going to try to maximize that value. That's what they're doing, and obviously they're finding that the customer is shifting in their interest. And what's the long tail? Did they not get enough investment from CPG to invest in this? What they believe is the competitive price point that they need. That's the other one. Is they're down at a $40 price point. I would argue that's a pretty aggressive price point in the current inflation of today. I think 40, even when I was young, would have been a decent price for a turkey dinner for our family. I mean, did they have to assemble it with their own products? And as soon as that first mover goes, the rest kind of have to be around there, or else they look terrible price wise. So I think there's a multiple dimensions at play, but evidently they are definitely not in the promotion. Certainly not in the active promotion from the retailer.
So, I think that the Thanksgiving meal is also evolving beyond these traditional bundles. We're seeing more plant-based options, more global flavors. Younger consumers are doing Friendsgiving. Lee, how should retailers and brands be thinking about the holiday table, not only Thanksgiving and Christmas, but in 2026 and beyond that?
I think we'll start to see more of that integrated into marketing campaigns. I mean, I've seen quite a bit from I think Friendsgiving, it seems to be the big thing that retailers and brands have kind of latched onto this year. You see a lot of that seen a lot from a YouTube and social media perspective of brands and retailers sort of tying into those themes and that alternative, compare contrast with the meal you're going to have with your family. So it's yet another marketing opportunity, and that's what it's all about, creating stories that are going to engage with the consumer and bond them to your brand.
And when we look in 2026, and let's assume, hopefully, that, food prices stabilize. I don't think they're ever going to go down, but they stabilize. Retailers, stabilize from a labor standpoint, from the tariff standpoint, and so on. Is it 2026 going to be the year that we do have these retailers focusing less on product and more on experiences?
I mean, I think we're definitely going to see more and more growth of these challenger brands, these growth brands. It is incredible over this last year how many new brands we've engaged with that are growing into large scale retailers that we all know, um, with unique products, primarily in the health, well being, like you said, protein oriented, just very kind of not niche because it's mainstream now. Being niche is mainstream,
Right.
but was niche 5 years ago is now the mainstream of today. We're seeing these very significant growth in many of those in the liquid products and the carbonated beverages or protein based beverages. We're seeing it in food, so I think we're just going to continue to see that. And so that's really what we will continue to see if Q4 and Q3 and of this year were an all example, at least of what Q1 will be and on. I think we're seeing an incredible growth, and we'll continue to see that growth and transformation of shelf. Um, I think that is a challenge that the large CPG has got to think about. I mean, they really need to think about how do I respond at the same rate? Because I think the pace that we're expecting, we as consumers are expecting a response of providing products that I want right now. People are looking for, we talked earlier, people are looking for like immediate um, response, immediate satisfactions. So if you aren't going to deliver it, I'm going to change stores. I'm going to go DTC. I'm going to go direct to consumer. I'm going to get the product I want. I'm going to go online to buy it from someone. I'm going to go to the store next door to you to buy it. So we are going to find what we want because we're kind of trained that way that we will give you anything that you want. That's what the kind of the industries are feeding to the customer. So I think that's why we're going to continue to see that transformation of shelf because I don't think people are looking for the 5 and 7 year shelf stable product that you can keep the can of corns in there for the next 5 Thanksgivings. I think they're perfectly content to have a very fresh Thanksgiving and then continue to buy again. So that's what I'm definitely seeing for 26.
You're right. And I think that the challenge for CPG companies is enormous. And I don't think they even get it. So, you can look at the emerging brands, see what they're doing. They're satisfying people's needs, whether it's health and wellness or protein or whatever else. And I look at what's gone on for this Thanksgiving in particular. And I see some of the stupidest things ever. I look at Mondelez, whose North American sales are down about 3.5%, and they announced that what they're going to have is they're going to have, Thanksgiving Oreo cookies. So, the Oreo cookies, number one, don't look like Oreos. There's not 2 layers with stuff inside, and they've got one that tastes like cranberry stuffing. They have one that's like turkey and gravy. They're just struggling to try to do something. I don't know what they're struggling and what they're trying to do.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, historically, they've provided the product. The retailer was the one that really brought it to the consumer. And so, the Oreos had to just build a brand around Oreos. And the rest was up to the retailer. And it's like that's the dynamic that's changing. And so not only is that distribution and reaching the customer through the retailer that much more difficult, it's up to them to innovate on their own and figure out how to reach the consumer more directly. And so it's a bit of a revolution that's going on there, which which probably explains that struggle there with gravy flavored Oreo cookies. I don't know.
Somebody's got to eat this stuff.
Well, and the pile on from my standpoint is that then we're where you've seen some of these very successful brands grow very quickly, then they get bought by one of the very large CPGs, and then they like kind of ruin the culture of what got them there. And that so they really need to revisit how they think about their relationship with the customer and how to be more agile. I have seen some of them start to break like emerging brands and traditional brands and trying to reorient so that there's an effort, right? But you're dealing with a much bigger ship than a startup brand that started by one of us. We're passionate about our food. We're making granola bars, and then we're building them in a plant. Then we're out. That's a very different path than when you've got a big ecosystem on top of that little innovator. So they are doing what they can, but the pace that they have to change, I think, is a big challenge for them because they're accountable to the street. That's another issue, right? They're accountable to the street. They've got to perform at the street expectation. A startup doesn't. So you're just very different decision criteria. So eager to see how it plays out. I'm hopeful. We'll see.
So, you're both sitting on tons of data. You're talking to retailers and brands every day. Now it's time for bold predictions for 2026. What's the one thing that's going to reshape how we think about retail value? Lee, I'm going to put you on the spot first.
Sure.
Where does private label share go in 2026? Have we hit a ceiling? Is this train still accelerating? Look into your crystal ball. What does 2026 look like, not only for private label, but in general for grocery retail?
Yeah. So two things there. From a private label perspective, I don't think we're even close to hitting the ceiling on that. I mean, if you look at it to date, everybody's been trying to match each other. That I'm going to match what you have from a private label perspective, and it's all the foundational things that people buy week in, week out. Fast forward, you look at now what Walmart's doing with Better Goods, highly
Great.
differentiated product line.
Yep.
It's not in that vein of the things I buy every week. It's more of the wants instead of needs. And so I suspect we'll see other brands start shifting in that direction as well, to highly differentiate it beyond just that core paper towels, soap, dishwasher detergent, et cetera, et cetera. The second piece I'd say is around Amazon. And I think the biggest thing we've seen this year is Amazon seems to have really kind of gotten a grip on grocery. I mean, obviously we've been talking about this since 2017 when they acquired Whole Foods, but there's been a lot of starts and stops in that time frame. What we've seen this year with our index reports that we publish monthly are all of a sudden that Amazon Fresh stores are beating everybody, beating Walmart, beating Aldi on core KVI items. And so they've gotten a grip on that. And then you look at what they're doing from a broader Amazon.com perspective, having everyday essential items available. It's going to start in 1,000 markets. They're saying by I think it's sometime next year up to 2,500 markets. So that's going to Amazon's already so embedded in so many households. It's a natural extension to start adding paper towels and milk and other things to your Amazon order. And then the last piece on Amazon is they're doing even more from that distribution perspective. You look at what they're doing with Winn-Dixie, where you can order Winn-Dixie through Amazon and have it delivered that way. And so it's not necessarily a partnership that you'd expect to see, but they've got the distribution down. I know they're in my neighborhood probably 45 times a day. So why reinvent the wheel if you can do that? So there's a lot of interesting things going on there, and I really think that's going to be the big emerging trend for next year in the grocery space.
I would agree with you. And in fact, just a couple weeks ago, I wanted to buy something that, here in Southern California, wasn't at Gelson's, wasn't at Bob's, wasn't at, Kroger. So I went on Amazon thinking, and it was frozen food, thinking that, maybe. So they have a connection with Bristol Farms, which I didn't even know about. So Bristol Farms actually delivered to me, these 3 packages of a frozen meal that I couldn't get elsewhere. And I went, wow, how smart is that? So I totally agree with you. Jake, personalization we've been talking about for years. But I think to your earlier point, I think we're finally at the point where it's real. Whether it's dynamic pricing, individualized offers, AI-driven promotions, AI, chats, filling out shopping lists. In your crystal ball, what does personal value look like in 2026?
Well, I think the starting from the end actually forward is the AI-driven promotion, personal offer. I think we're starting to see that mature. It makes sense because that's a really good space for technology. We have scaled technology that, so long as your underlying data is clean, which again, whole separate issue, but leaving that alone, I think you really have the technology that scales out that allows you to literally at least cast every individual as a node inside of an ecosystem and consider them unique and promote and present to them uniquely. I think if that's done well, it's actually a win-win scenario, really. That's one of those instances where you actually have a good answer because the brand wants to promote and spend money only where they think they're going to be valued, right? So then you're putting that promotion right in front of the person that is a very probable consumer for your product at the time when you either find that they have a replenishment need or something. So you're getting more and more precise on your promotion. So that's also favorable to me as a consumer because I'm getting a promotion right when I need $2 off of shampoo, which of course is a long cycle purchase. So there's a lot of precision in that decision, or assumptive probabilities, whatever you want to call it. That's really unique to me. It's beneficial to me that I got $2, and it's good to them because they didn't have a bunch of promotions out that someone just took advantage of $2 off that wasn't really capturing that perfect customer to create any loyalty. So I think there's a scenario where if it's played right, you're promoting to people that you're already trying to get to trial or people that are needing to replenish the product that you're in, the product space you're in. So I think it's a win-win if done well. I think we're going to see that come out. I think relative to dynamic pricing, I think that's a whole nother puzzle. I think you have a lot of, this is a very litigious society. You live in California. You should know more than anyone. It is very, very tough to have different pricing for different people. How do you even argue that's fair, ethical, appropriate? You're seeing so many cases come up around discrimination. So I get the idea. I don't think that has the same, it has a very high risk from a legal standpoint that it wasn't in the interest of the individual or the collective group of individuals that were being treated differently. That just doesn't seem like a societal norm. So we'll see. I wouldn't want to be the first mover on that game.
Yeah, I think Senator Elizabeth Warren is going to be calling you to testify on her behalf. So, for both
Luckily,
of
we
you,
don't have phone numbers. We only have Teams, so we're safe.
yeah, exactly. Question for both of you: will 2026 be the year that major retailers start abandoning those traditional weekly circulars entirely? I mean, they're expensive. They're at least in my case, junk mail. If I want to see a price, I'm going online. Lee, why don't you take a stab at that first?
Yeah, I mean, that question's been asked for years now, and there's still some hanging around. I mean, not nearly like they used to be. I know there's a lot of retailers that still have them available in store, and I think in those cases they're catering to a very narrow demographic that they're hanging on to, no longer sending them out. A lot of that's moved to the web. So whether there'll be a piece of paper that somebody can pick up and walk around the store with, I wouldn't be surprised if there's still some version of that. But as we've talked with other things here, there's so many kind of new areas. All falls under this broader retail media umbrella of ways that the stores and the brands are engaging with customers.
So, Jake, same question, but I want you to tell me what replaces that circular if, in fact, it goes away.
Well, I was going to actually reflect on some of our earlier conversation, right? I mean, so we're a technology company. We're in the intelligence space. We're always, we're pushing the envelope on what technologies we can leverage to create the next stage of how we would operate in retail. The majority of consumers that shop at retail are not us, right? I mean, the entire population of the country shops at a grocery store. So, from our standpoint, we may think that circular doesn't make sense, but there's a ton of grandparents, my dad, people like that are not as progressively technology oriented, just used to their own behavior, and still make up a substantial amount of shoppers. So it doesn't make sense to us because, of course, we're going to go online and we want to see the offer directly with it, or if we're shopping in a more progressive technology oriented mentality. But I don't think that's a universal consumer. So there's a whole spectrum of consumers that need to be considered. I think that's why a lot of these things that, when we're having a tech conversation in this nature about what's going to happen in the future, it doesn't seem to make as much sense. But practically, there's a heck of a lot of shoppers that are just going there to pick up groceries and need and prefer just the old way. My dad would still absolutely have like a touch phone or rotary phone if he could. So, there's a lot of those guys. Every one of his friends is those guys too.
And you're also bringing up a point that what comes to mind is it really talks about and underscores what's going on in store is so important, that a promotion, a great display. I mean, if you can get the person in the store, that's hard. But if you get them in the store and you wow them with something where they walk in and they go, I need that, you've really succeeded as a merchandiser and a retailer. And I think that, in the past few years, we've gotten away from that, a bit, and we've just, gotten a bit lazy, whether it's online, whether it's, just not having, I remember in New York, there was a trade publication called Modern Grocer, which is long defunct. But what they had is they had weekly contests at retail, display contests, where these store managers and so on would build these fabulous displays. Not only would it, would they win a plaque or whatever they won, but it would really move a lot of merchandise. So how do we get back to that? How do we get back to having excitement when you get to the store? Either one of you comment on that.
Well, I'll offer my opinion, then I'll leave you time. But from my standpoint, that's all the stuff we still have to do in retail, right? It's still 85+% of all of the activity, all of the revenue sits there. All of the conversations are about the other 15 because it's fun, it's exciting, it's innovation. It's innovation in retail, which for a long time wasn't at this level of innovation, right? I mean, it was 2 or 3% online grocery like 6 years ago, 8 years ago. And then 2020 came and then it became crazy. And all of it was being worked on, but there was no wave. Then the wave came and everybody excited to be in a wave. So I think you're seeing actually a resurgence in people's focus and acknowledgement that store operations and physical presence is still your core tenet of how you manage your brand and your image. Everything else is fun. It's exciting. It's your next customer or your future customers. You always have to be nurturing your future customers and your existing customers. So I think that's why you're seeing so much energy in the industry. Your future customers, very likely, these folks focused on the technologies and the other ways to engage. But your core revenue is still coming from your traditional customer that you need to continue to service. So, I think you're seeing this everywhere where COVID was highly disruptive to how industries operated. Whether or not you've seen a ton of like overhiring activity and current resetting of those expectations. I think you're seeing the same in like how we focus our energy. You become e-com was your world. It takes a while to take the energy off that and put it back where it used to be, which is in the store. So we're definitely seeing a lot of focus on store and physical presence.
And I think if you look at, Wegmans and Sprouts in particular, I mean, they get it. Where it's really, walking in and having that, wow experience. So last question for both of you. We're running a bit out of time. When you look at the state of retail today, promo wars we've talked about, loyalty shifts we've talked about, private label surge we've talked about. Are you optimistic or concerned about where we're headed? Lee, why don't you take the first shot?
I mean, I'm gonna go optimistic. I mean, there's a lot of dynamics in the marketplace, and ultimately all the dynamics and disruption is all around sort of better serving the customer. So from so it might be harder to do things on the go forward, but I think ultimately it's going to be a win because it's all about, how can the brand, how can the retailer, all the different players involved better serve those customers.
Jake?
All right. So I have a little bit different perspective. So very simply, in my view, the consumer is driving the retailer in a growing in a more material way than I believe they ever have, but just given the access we have to information. So you can look at it both ways. The net is there's probably only one pizza, right? We're growing in population by a couple percent annually, but that's not a material growth. So then you kind of look at it, there's only one pizza. So there, by default, any win is someone else's loss, is kind of what you've seen over the years, right? As retail is consolidated, the really good retailers and the operators kind of win and the others lost. And so I don't know that you can have optimism of not, or except that I'm optimistic personally in understanding the dynamics of retail and what we're seeing. And we personally think that our solutions are positioning brands to be very successful in both identifying opportunities and resolving them at pace. So my perspective is very optimistic, but I think there will be winners and losers. There always are. So I very specifically think that I think we have a winning solution that I think that's why we're optimistic. But not everyone will win.
So, Jake, Lee, thanks so much. This has been a fantastic discussion. Everyone watching has a lot to think about as they plan for 2026. Thank you both for your time and insights, as always. And here's to a great 2026.